John isn't going to be here. I'm not sure if Daniel will be. So I guess we can cover what we can cover. There's Neil.
Yeah, and Adrian is gone probably this week too, right? So.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
he's on. Right.
He's on vacation.
That's right. It's IBM vacation week, apparently.
Hey, Neil. Hey, Petra.
Am I on?
Yeah. How you doing, Neil?
Okay. Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Pedro.
Hi, Pedro. I think this is as good as it's going to get. Shall we just get started?
Sure.
I think so. I was just explaining here that I have construction about to start outside any moment now. I've held them out for about half an hour. I'm not sure how long it will last.
You can create an earthquake early warning, and they will.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Count the chisels. Yeah.
Very popular with my neighbors. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because we know John and Adrian aren't going to be here. I'm not sure about Daniel, so we can just start. I just wanted to start off today by maybe touching on the work with. Well, Neil, you had quite a few comments the other day. Do you want to start with those?
Yes, I could give some status. I got 2 of the devices installed or initialized them. And in my workshop, this is the building which has got a very solid foundation. And so the process of putting it up, I mean, the app, when it works, and the whole process is fantastic. I mean, it's the best I've seen of any of the initializations of various devices, but somehow there's some errors in there as well, that when it hits those, they're not visible. So I'm very intrigued. At some point when I got a little bit of spare time, I'm going to dig into exactly how is it doing it, getting that information across on the Wi-Fi device. So I started off with initializing it with an account that I already have, which is the Neil H20 plus the GR2104 at my address. And it just did nothing. There was nothing there. So I rebooted it a couple of times. So that's an email that's already in the database that's in there.
That happened to me, right? Is that you don't know that you're already in the system when you're trying to create a new account. That happened to me.
Right. So, I mean, just to comment if it worked out, I don't know, who does the app?
Well, John and James. James has not been around, but mostly John.
John.
We need to log these things in an issue, I guess.
Right. So, okay, I've got John said to actually do that. I mean, some of this stuff is absolutely amazing where it's actually, John's so diverse in what he's doing. It's just amazing. So, but what would be nice is in this case, and particularly thinking of that you're talking about groups of people and that's a good target, is somehow pick up a profile of some sort. If you've already got an entry in there, like, I mean, I've already got an access, you'd want to put it in there straight away so that it tries to use that group. That would be really, really nice. But what I did was I actually initialized as separate devices each time using the Neil H20 address, and they're both of them now running. And got them in there. What I've also done is connected them up to a USB host and then put that into a Raspberry Pi 4 running Ubuntu. And the idea is I really just want to be able to monitor what's coming out of it. It's using the 1.4 version. I think it's 1.4 version. So but anyway, it turns out that on the host side, doing that for the Raspberry Pi, running Raspberry Pi OS, it just keeps rebooting. It really doesn't like having the drivers or whatever it is, or the USB host, the USB hub device. So that's why I switched from Raspberry Pi OS to a Ubuntu release. But now the Ubuntu is going to sleep. So it ran for a couple of hours. and was on my network and stuff. Now on the device that's on my desk inside on my development desk, my development device, what I've bought for, whenever I plug in Ethernet on that, and this is running the version 1.50 or the version 150, it keeps on rebooting. And what we're seeing on that, I was just talking with John this morning to follow up on it, is that it's getting a corruption. And the corruption is coming from the Ethernet device going in and out. So the Ethernet device is appearing and then disappearing, appearing and disappearing. And that is causing something to be exercised inside that causes, I'm just guessing from what John has said in the past, some form of, you know, the JSON to be exercised or something happening inside there. So, I mean, to be honest, these are typical problems that happen in a system for the first time. But I think there's two sides to it. Is why is the Ethernet disconnect happening? We don't really know. I mean, is it a faulty hub of mine, a faulty router of mine? I mean, it's not been a problem in the past when I've plugged it into Raspberry Pis. But it could happen at any point. You could get a bad Ethernet with something or the other going on.
Have you tried a different cable, Neil?
I haven't. No, I've got a whole bunch of cables on this, but you know, from one level, there is having something that is a little bit bad is actually a real benefit at this stage. That's just, you know, my from a hardware engineer point of view. You know, being able to find a way of exercising stuff. Now we can say, hey, we just don't want to look at it, or you know, because there isn't resources or whatever. But knowing that something like this is going on is a benefit in being able to put a use case together. Because what you really don't want is just this continual rebooting that's happening. It runs and then it reboots when it plugs in on the Ethernet. Now, the other side of this might be, and I'm just going to be the sort of, you know, high-level view of it, it might be that there's something going on with the power and it can't quite cope. Now, I've got it running off a USB hub, so I don't think there's power limited from the hub side. But if on that cable coming through, there's a power issue inside the device, and, you know, this is...
Neil, you have two devices, is that right? Or one
I've got
device?
three. I've got three.
Can you try this with another device? I'll tell you why, because the batch that you have, they were all tested and they all work fine, but potentially there could be a manufacturing issue. So it'd be interesting to, if you see, I know that the components for the Ethernet circuit were these tiny little 0401 components. And I'm just hoping, and we did those in Mexico, that batch. So I'm hoping that there's nothing wrong. If there was something wrong, we'd send you a new one straight away. But I just want to make sure that that's not a hardware issue. Okay,
I can try doing that. The difficulty at the moment is just switching them around, and I was getting set up and all this, and in the same time, I've actually been juggling a really important other issue that I've had to deal with. So I just wanted to get it working yesterday and set up.
It's a really important one, actually. I'm so happy you did find this issue, because Ethernet should be the primary way people connect sensors. At least that's what we've been saying in Puerto Rico, and we haven't tested it properly. So thank God you found this and we're talking about it, because imagine if suddenly 90 sensors go down and we can't connect to them again.
Right. So that's again sort of why, because I've got a hardware background and, you know, played with a lot of hardware. I mean, on the stack of things, this hardware has to be verified, is, you know, where it's at, and it's that you know, before you do any production of some sort. So that's always been a challenge within organizations that I've been, is how do you get the basic software enough there to be able to do the hardware verification. So right. I think that's basically my status, is that I'm running on the release 1.4 from my workshop with the two devices next to each other, setting them up. What came up also, as I sort of put up there, is on doing the installation, it would be really nice to have some sort of idea, how are these supposed to be installed? Is it a vertical aspect that's wanted, or is it really that they just need to be installed to something solid? I mean, that's without without having a lot of mechanical background, that's my guess, is that somewhere in there they need to be bolted to the concrete. How do you get the vibration that could be coming through the earthquake transmitted to the board? And
So that's another thing we should talk about today, which is the documentation. And I think there's an issue Daniel created, and I had commented on it. And I'll be really happy to have that discussion because, yeah, that's an often asked question.
Right. So at the moment, I'm assuming I'm just going to take some screws, and then I have this concrete floor, and I was looking at it, and screw them into the floor.
So the issue. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is a good comment. I think together with the MAC address, I think we should also put an arrow, like how the sensor should be oriented, because we do it's not absolutely critical, but we would like to have it in a particular orientation so we know which component is vertical, because we primarily do processing on the vertical component, not horizontals.
Well, how about if I change the 3D printed files? Can you see my camera? If I change the 3D print so that there was a sort of an embossed arrow, a big arrow pointing up here, that might do the trick.
And is that how
something like that for sure. Yeah.
Is that how you're wanting it to be? Is to be up?
Yeah, exactly. The way I've always done it is we put the cables at the bottom so that it all hangs down. It would be a bit awkward otherwise, and so I think we could just have it up. But absolutely right, Neil. There's a lack of instruction there. We need to do that.
The other thing is that some branding of some sort, but should include the Ethernet number, at least one of them, I think, and possibly two of them, because when you've this is something we learned from the telecom side of things. No matter who it is that's on the receiving end, if you're aiming it at a audience that is, you want to empower them to be able to help you. And the first thing is this device identifiable? Which is the MAC number of some sort, I think. So if they come up and say something, then you can track it in your network as to what's sort of going on if there's people to do it. The other thing that comes up for me looking at the installation of this, that I always think is a good idea, and I build it into my products, is this goes somewhere geographically, and it's got an identity within the organization that it's being installed by. So a geographical identity, when it's initialized, a street address or some sort of 80-character field that the customer can use when they're installing it, would be valuable, even if it's their own identity or something that has to be used by the accountants or something or the other, but something that has a way of embedding an 80-character field or 120-character field when you're doing the initialization from the app that would then be visible to some people, at least on the web, would be useful, I think.
Great. Well, here's something, Neil. So in our quest to make these things cheaper and cheaper, there's a limit how low we can go. One thing that we're doing right now is we're getting these made at the moment in PCB Way. It's a shop in China, and they have an online store. So it was a bright idea of this YouTube guy. Why don't we just sell them direct from China? And it saves a huge amount of money. It saves the shipping and the importing to Mexico. And also China has many more shipment options than Mexico does, even regular post. So we're able to really cut off, 20% of potentially a bit more of the cost of the device, potentially 30. So one of the things is if they sell it there, we have to give them all these instructions for how to package the product. For example, 3D printed cases, the volumes we're not quite doing the injection molding yet. So 3D printed cases would be the way to go, but they're quite expensive, and then the branding. So there's a little bit of thinking about how we package the product, because really they sell development boards, Arduino copies. So that's what people go to their store to buy, or what our community might do, or our maker community might do. So I guess we have to think carefully about how we offer it to people who are not makers, who aren't going to tinker that much, and who really want an out-of-the-box experience.
But that's where you want that unique ID, I think, in there. So thinking of it from the person who's just the installer, or if you're thinking of the scaling it to an organization, Puerto Rico earthquake, volunteers, it's just what you can do there. I was working with a Taiwanese group as part of another job a couple of years ago, and it was interesting there that even though they were highly technical, some of the people they were employing to do the assembly, you had to have good instructions for it. And sufficiently good instructions, of course, that it would be translated to Chinese. So it is thinking out that process of here is a sticker and then stick it on there, but also here is a way of printing off the MAC ID. And we're just looking at the way it comes up at the moment. I mean, there should be a way of having the MAC ID come up on the screen. So before it even gets initialized, and it doesn't at the moment. So when you plug it in on the USB, it doesn't come up straight away. It actually has to initialize. It has to be initialized into the system, and then the MAC ID comes up as the second part.
Oh, you mean through the serial monitor?
Yes.
Oh, got you. Yeah, well, that should be quite straightforward, right? So that should be easy.
Right, and then that could almost be a cut and paste into a document with a printer off the side.
Yeah.
So just an idea there, but yeah, I mean, it's amazing what it takes to do the thinking of this, and I'm some point really be interested in having a chat behind the scenes as to what direction the whole thing takes and what a business case if you have one.
Yeah, I think none of us know where this is going. Here's one thing I did, by the way, just to show off. So this is version 2 of my provisioning system. Don't know if you can see this, but basically this is a Raspberry Pi which connects to the sensor, and I've now automated the whole thing so that without having to do any SSH stuff, you just sort of press the button, and you instantly on the display get told. Don't know if you can see, but you get told it's flashing, and then when at the end, it's sort of the LEDs change, a little beep happens, and then it's ready for the next one. But very easy to use this to also read out the MAC addresses, etc.
Right. So maybe the MAC address should just be spat out in a JSON type format, and then you just need a parser to pick up on it, and then spit it out onto a printer. Yeah.
The MAC address is it can be read at any moment, can't it, from the device? Yeah.
I don't think so. That's what you need to figure out for an uninitialized device. I mean, I had to actually bring it into. I had to initialize it in the system before I could get the MAC address for my other two.
But it should be available because the MAC address is just from the Wi-Fi radio module. So I mean, it should just be readily there for us to get at any moment. I mean,
okay.
Yeah, I think that there must be a basic Arduino sketch, which is just read the MAC address of your Wi-Fi module. I'll have a look. It should be doable. So just to be clear, then, so the provisioning process, I think I just understand what you've mentioned. The provisioning process, we need to be a little bit clearer as to when things go wrong and what's happening, and if the user already exists. The Ethernet failure, that's a big deal. Is there an issue for the Ethernet failure that we have in GitHub, or is it something that we should put in GitHub? How can we track this problem?
I can put something in GitHub on the sensor side of things, the sensor firmware, and just phrase it up as that. I sort of was talking to John this morning how I should do it, because I think, John has got a I was just amazing his scope. So it was a private load that I was doing the testing against. So at this point, I wanted to just check in with him as to whether or not he thought he could just solve it or, do it. So I'll put something out there on GitHub.
If we could track it, because I'm quite worried about that one. So if that's something that we could track, I'll be grateful, and I can have a look at that with testing here as well, because I've got a number of devices.
And if you want me to put a capacitor on the back end of this, I have got some various types of capacitors, high-speed capacitors, and I've been working with another product that hasn't got us a lot. Anyway, so I've got some that I can always try some try something on it and see if it solves
Well,
it.
if you have a good microscope, just on the device that's failing, if you wouldn't mind having a look at the whole Ethernet circuitry and just make sure that all the resistors and capacitors are sort of like well connected, if you're capable. Otherwise, just try another device. But it could be a manufacturing problem.
That's my 10 times magnifying glass.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
That would do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
copies most things.
Yeah. Yeah, because those are really pesky, those little 402s.
Right.
And then the last thing is the documentation. Daniel's on the line. Daniel, what are your thoughts about this? Because I started to create a wiki page for this. So I started to think about the journey of the user on our project, and so I did the pull request for the README, and then I referred to the wiki several times. I'm not sure the README is finalized, and you've made some very good comments. I've got to incorporate, but it did seem to me that the wiki would live inside of one of our many repos, and that people wouldn't naturally find that wiki. And I don't want us to have millions of wikis. And then I thought to myself, well, actually, the way we're doing it now isn't so bad that we have like a documentation site. So I didn't know what to think anymore at the end of that whole journey I did.
Yeah. So just to scroll it back, we kind of have 3 different options for where the canonical source of the information should be. There's the website. There's the README file of the main OpenEEW repo in the single organization. And then we've got the wiki, which unfortunately can't sit at the organizational level, but can sit at that top level. And they're all valid options, right? I think, for example, if you look at another Call for Code project, we've got the Cluster Duck Protocol. They kind of make a nice little mix of all 3 to kind of attract or kind of work with where the developers fall in. So they do have on their .org site a high level, very visual, very oriented on the top level information. It's a single page app, so there's no documentation that you dive into there. Then it points out to the README for the main Cluster Duck Protocol repo. They only have one repo, which is to their benefit.
Yeah,
there.
That would be much easier if we just had one repo.
Exactly. So they've got a pretty substantial README. At least it's enough paragraphs to describe what's going on. And I think that was it probably equaled in content to what we had for OpenEEW. But they really have gone all in on the wiki for the real-time information, which is linked from the README, of course, and by extension from the .org site. So I think it's a good model, but there's no one-size-fits-all. I do think the wiki gives us the most power in terms of pages and documentation, consolidation, and opening it up to potential other casual users. But at the same time, GitHub doesn't make it that obvious that a page has a wiki, and you have to constantly point over to it. So I do like the idea of the wiki as the most powerful tool for documentation, as long as we still have enough context within the README file and the .org or the .com site that talk about the project, provide just enough context for those 3 different audience types we've talked about, and maybe there's more now. And my comments really in the README updates were, let's make sure we have the wiki up to date before we link people to it, and let's keep enough information in the README to give people the elevator pitch on what this is at a high level from a technical point of view and kind of the problem it's solving point of view. And the .com site, we can make that a single page app, as we've talked about before, where that's highly visual. It talks more about the community, getting into Slack, finding GitHub, and potentially include some videos, some great documentation of Grio's other deployments, for example, in Mexico, anything that comes out of what's going on in Puerto Rico, things like that.
Well, so Grio's other deployments in Mexico, we're going to sort of port over to OpenEEW. I mean, already the data is being shared, but we're investigating now how to, because they currently live in AWS, we're investigating how to route their data to the MQTT servers on IBM, so that we can retain their functionality today, but also use them as nodes in our overall system.
Here, I'm just dropping in the links here. So you see there's on their .org site, they've got the link out to their link out to their main README repo, which is that. They've got a link over to Linux Foundation where we have kind of a high level project. They also have some There's a link to their startup, which is Project Owl. And then from within their repo, linking from the intro paragraph, they have a link to their wiki, which is really nicely organized. It's very easy to see everything that's going on there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I really like what they've done, but again, not all one size fits all. But this, I think, is a pretty good model. And they tend to have really good graphics with what they built, and I know you do for the pitch materials we've seen for the OpenEEW project. So whatever we can do to kind of, I think, replicate a lot of the success here is going to be helpful. Because if you see on the right, they've got a nice menu in their wiki where...
Yeah, I like the emoticons in their menu.
Yeah, exactly. And they've got it sorted by the devices, the build process and local environment, other developer resources like the spec, and then leadership and FAQ and kind of where to go next.
As an outsider, I'll just make my only comment about this is that they do assume that you know all about ducks. And I sort of think, as an outsider, sometimes it's, maybe instead of just hardware, instead of calling it hardware, they say the ducks. You need a little bit of an intro to understand it. But
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's hopefully, so their .org site, if you scroll down, it kind of, I guess, covers it. It maybe assumes you've looked at that page. But if you scroll down their .org site, as I mentioned, it's a single-page app. It's got a lot of logos on it. It does talk about the ideas for their ducks. They talk about what's kind of Project Owl specific versus Linux Foundation project specific, and the community, of course. And they've got a blog in here too, which is fairly new. I don't have too much in there, but that's where they did their year of review stuff, which I think we had talked about too, which was really cool for the graphic.
So talking about, say, our sort of MVP, I think Kristen had worked up a sort of a screen, what do you call it, a prototype for the one-page site. I'm not sure what status that's in.
I haven't seen it, but that's great.
Do you know, Ryan?
Yeah.
Sorry, I realized I had to go pick up my son. I got to drop. I'm sorry, guys, but this was at least, hopefully, it was a great seed of a conversation of what this was. But
it was great, very helpful. Thanks, Daniel.
I'll catch up on that.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel.
Thank you. Bye.
So Kristen did create that, and I was just going to ask about that. So I'd like to. So the two big things that are kind of on my radar that I'd like to do is start building as fast as possible, or getting some sort of state as fast as possible, or is the MQTT connections and dashboard, which we can talk about, but also the website, right? The OpenEEW.com. Because even if Kristen has more to do with the designs and whatnot, we can still at least start building the infrastructure for it and connect it to some sort of markdown document, and then we can add things as we go. And
there's lots of off-the-shelf things you can use there, right? It doesn't need to be very complicated. I mean, I have no idea.
No, it shouldn't be too complicated. My goal is to create, like what Daniel was saying, a single-page application, but also make it editable with Markdown. So there is a React library that's the name of, for some reason, escaping me right now. Will make all that happen, and I don't think it'll be too complicated. But it is a little more complicated than just writing some HTML and CSS on a page. But yeah, I was wondering, so for the website should be, I think, the main source of all the introductory stuff having to do with the web, in addition to the stuff that Daniel was talking about with the wiki. But we can always sort of make that a part of, or not a part of the website, but we can always just link to it from the website and make it all accessible through the website, right? So even if we decide that the introductory documentation is better in some other form, the website serves as the source to get you there, right? But what would people be looking at the website when they initialize their first sensor? Because if that were true, perhaps we could build some sort of wizard or little thing that you can click through on the site that will kind of take you step by step to bring the initialization process in. Now, the trouble is that conflicts with what is in the information conveyed in the provisioning app. And I also don't want it to get too cumbersome, right? With like having a bunch of, it's like you have a manual, you have the website, you have the provisioning app. And
and also, every time you duplicate something, it's going to fall out of sync. I feel like the provisioning app should give you all the information you need, and that there's a documentation somewhere which supports it. But maybe you shouldn't be clicking through screens, because the provisioning app is already clicking through screens anyway.
I would definitely agree with that. The provisioning app, I think that from what Neil was saying, the provisioning app just needs a little more. It needs to just tell you a little more of what's going on. Like, for example, the account. So I'm not sure why. So the account that Neil already had in the system and then tried to add a sensor to it, that's sort of an interesting bug to me, because I can't think of where it would fail along the process, because it does need to, in that process, it does need to connect to the dashboard backend to actually facilitate adding the sensor to the account. But something like that should at least produce an error message on the screen. So we just need a little more error handling and a little more description of what's going on in the provisioning app. And
error handling happens. Also, sometimes you don't get a Wi-Fi name appear. It's happened to me, and I don't know why it doesn't appear. And this is to do with the library, I think, smart config. But there should be a notification or something. You don't have a Wi-Fi. Like I was just like, oh, maybe it's just blanked out for some reason, and people are going to fall up on that one.
Yeah.
Well, also, what do you call it in the web world, Ryan? Where the first sort of pages of an app which tell you what to do with like the little 3 dots. What do you call those? Sort of onboarding. Like, it doesn't seem to have an onboarding section at the beginning of the app.
Oh, you mean like just sort of an introductory screen to kind of
welcome to OpenEEW. We're going to save the world from earthquakes. And the next screen, you've probably got your sensor in your hand. These are the things you're going to need. And the next screen, and then you get started with provisioning. But just I
don't know if there's a formal name. I mean, on a regular old website, that would just be the landing page, right? Or that would be just the whatever the first step in some sort of wizard or multi-step process would be. But yeah, whatever that's called, we probably should have it. It's.
I was going to say, many products have a quick start guide in PDF form, which you can download from the company website. And maybe that would be a good idea for us to make a quick start guide document, print it into PDF form, put it out there. I've got this cat flap which reads the identity chip on cats and lets them in if they're. And on the very front of it, can you see this? On the front of it, it tells you to download the manual from the company site /PDF. We could easily put that little symbol, that little bit of information on the box.
Or a little QR code or something, yeah.
Yeah. But even having some sort of insert like that, even if in that form, I mean, basically, we just need to convey to everyone. I mean, no one's going to know that the dashboard even exists just when they get the sensor, right? And as this functionality expands, you'll be able to. I mean, you already can look at your sensors on the dashboard and see their location, and shortly you'll be able to see accelerations from them and whatnot. But no one, I think the idea was that people would be led into the dashboard from that final provisioning process where you create a password. But so far, the success rate on getting people to that process is like 30%.
What if Ryan, on the website, there was like these sort of 2 CTAs? One of them would be provision your sensor, and it might take you to the documentation site or the wiki, or to download the app. And then the other one would be go to the dashboard, so that people can, even if they don't have a device, they can still go to the dashboard, and people are aware that those are the 2 main interfaces that we've developed.
Yeah.
Well, at the moment, people don't know whether they should screw the device to the wall first before they initialize it, or whether they should initialize it first and then screw it to the wall.
Yeah.
And and the dashboard is just so fantastic when you get to it and you just see that big picture. That's the bit that'll really give you this is it. That's the sort of the feeling. But
yeah,
if in the dashboard you can get to the information about how you screw it to the wall, that would be useful.
Yeah, that's actually something that possibly we could have in the onboarding process on the dashboard, is just a little description of where now to place your sensor. But but yeah, I guess the key pieces of information are from at least my perspective, are just we need to describe that we need to get people to know that the dashboard exists, and we also need to let them know that there's this process where if you're initially creating an account and you don't have anything on an account under your email address initially, it will create a dashboard account for you. If you already have an account and you enter that same email address, it should add the sensor automatically to your account, because I think people are lost in that process. It's just sort of and I can see why that's confusing. It's just sort of like what am I doing by entering a email address again here? Do I have to log into something, or what's going on?
Well, the provisioning app should make that clearer, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
To your point, Gareth, so I now that I've got some clarity about putting it on the wiki from Daniel, like, so honestly, I didn't know where to put this content I've been writing up. I think you're right. We need to have this sort of almost like a manual, and maybe the first step is for me to sort of just flesh out whichever, we'll share it on GitHub, the sort of the steps to initialize your sensor, and then we can turn that into a PDF or whatever format people need it to be in. But the basic information about the device, which includes the specs of the device and all of these things, need to be somewhere for people to refer to, and we don't have it. The other thing that I realized, because I started working on the documentation this week, is that it's a real mess. Like, it was all written by me about a year ago, before any of this had started, and I think a lot of it talks about Grillo, which is no longer really relevant. This is now our project, and a lot of it is relating to stuff that had been done before the project, and I think that's also adds a lot of confusion when people read it. I think it should be like, I've now looked at a couple of sites like this LoRa satellite project, or whatever, and it's the clearest thing. It's as clear as daylight. It just starts off with, we're building a satellite network for small devices. This is how you provision your little satellite device, your receiver. This is how, and it's just so easy. But you go to our site, and it's deliberately trying to confuse you. So let me try and get these steps done and put them in wiki, and we can move them somewhere else later. But I got really frustrated with how confusing our project has become.
So if we were to start on creating the OpenEEW site, what repository would we want to do that in? Would it be the current repo that's for OpenEEW.com?
Yeah, so I would suggest, this is just my opinion, that we host it on GitHub Pages, because it's free and we can see it all, and we just replace the existing one, which I created in very quickly using this Docusaurus thing. So whatever you're going to do is going to be a million times better. So just replace that one and archive the one that we have somehow.
How is the current one hosted? Is it on GitHub Pages also?
It's all on GitHub Pages, yeah.
Okay, so to leave that one up while we're creating the new one might mean, well, I guess we could just, just a question of where we want to put the code in the meantime. Like, do we want to just create a new repository for the new?
Well, I mean, if you were to host it locally, potentially, and then just sort of share it in a meeting, and I don't know.
Yeah, I can do that.
Screenshots, or we can all host it locally until we're ready.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. So I'm going to get started with the documents, and I really want to have that up very, very quickly.
Do you have photographs of what? I know Kristen was looking for. I'm not sure what stuff she used for the prototype, or what content she used for the prototype, but do you have like really good high resolution photos of the sensors and everything?
I've got a few, and actually my wife, who's a photographer, video, but she was taking some as well, so that we could for the Chinese website as well. So let me send you what I have. Yeah,
because that would be if they match the photographs that Kristen uses, great. Otherwise, I can also figure out kind of how to put everything in there. But anything, the quality of the photos is really the best, because we can, take as high res as possible. We can always make them look,
whatever you need. Like, if you honestly, whatever you need, my wife can help us get that done. She's away for a few days, but she can help get that done, because we can. We have all the good cameras and equipment here, and I've got lots of devices. So
yeah.
So I'll send you what we have, and if you tell me there's something that would be better, then we'll get it made.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, Václav, did you want to mention any of your recent explorations?
Yeah, for sure. I have a few things that I wanted to tell you guys about. First, I got it running end to end, so I'm receiving historical data to MQTT or from MQTT, and it's streaming through the seismological algorithms, and it's also going to those two microservices that are one is writing to IBM Cloudant, and the other one is dumping to AWS. So I got it like pseudo final. It still may change a little bit, especially those like Cloudant databases. They may change a little bit, but maybe let me share my screen, and I'll just show you. So I ended up. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yep.
Cool. So I ended up creating. There were a few tables in the database already for, that John created in there. But I ended up doing. We're gonna have 4 of them. We're gonna have detections, devices, events, and traces. So devices, it's quite simple. It's just like about the device, about the location, and MAC address and stuff like that. Then we're gonna have detections. That's what the seismology algorithm outputs. That's the parameters of the detections and the displacement at each trace. Then it's events, and it's not one event per earthquake, but as the algorithms work on that, like they iterate each second, they update location and magnitude of the events. They kind of produce more messages. So when it reaches the threshold of 4 detections, which may change still, but when it reaches 4 detections, it issues an alert, or not an alert right now, but it like publishes a message to MQTT, and it gets saved in here. So many of these events, there's like 20 events or so per one earthquake. And then there's traces, and I put traces here. It's not like the trace data, but this is a database that keeps track of what data are saved in AWS S3. So there is a file name, file path to the AWS S3, and then there's like what time it starts, like the timestamp when it starts, when it ends the document. So this makes it so much easier when we actually access the data in future. So what I'm doing, like when all this runs, I'm creating this output for events. So if you can see this document, this is like an output for one earthquake. And there are a few figures in here. This is the epicenter of the earthquake, as it was determined by that real-time algorithm. So the star is the earthquake, and then the color map overlay is the earthquake intensity that is calculated from the earthquake magnitude. And the earthquake intensity is the Mercalli scale here from 2 to 9. The Mercalli scale goes all the way up to 12. So shaking intensity 9 is like very intense, and but you can see that the 9, like it didn't even reach 9. This was like magnitude 5 earthquake. So this is one of those 15 earthquakes that I'm using for testing. And then there are 2 figures down here. One, like both of them start when the earthquake origins. So that's the time 0, and it goes to 60 seconds. And we have a number of detections here on the first plot. So we have 6 detections on this earthquake, and this is the magnitude. Or like how it evolved in time. So once we have sufficient number of detections, we get this magnitude. So this was about magnitude 5.4 or so. And then this is the traces. This is the traces that are associated with that earthquake. So we have about, 8 or 9 traces and they are sorted based on the epicentral distance. So this is at the earthquake epicenter down here, it's 0 and 200 up in here. So they are sorted based on the distance. So as you can see, the earthquake waves arrive progressively later as you get to to further distances. So, and we have the detections. We have the P-wave detections here up to about 80 kilometers, and then these two traces back in here, like in the greater distance, they do have detections, but those detections are not the primary waves. Those are the like stronger amplitude secondary waves that we do not want to associate with the earthquake. So that's what the algorithm does. It like tries to associate only those primary waves based on which the calculation is done.
So it understands that those last two are too further away in time or in distance.
Oh, it understands, like the algorithm tries to match like what is the best match or what is the most likely match for these 8 phases to be like it tries to form earthquakes based on these 8 phases, and it understands that it cannot really associate all these 8 detections with one earthquake, and that like these 6 can be associated with one earthquake, but these 2 don't fit to anything. So it actually also creates like events for these 2 phases, but they are like there by themselves because they like neither of these phases have any other detections that can be associated with that and form a meaningful earthquake. If that's clear.
Yeah, very clear. Hey, well, I think it's remarkable. I don't think I'm pretty excited because what you just showed us is a real proof of concept, because you took real data coming in as JSONs, well, from a historic data set. You processed it using the algorithms that have been developed for OpenEEW that you've done, and then you've outputted it. I mean, you've taken us from the sensor to the output, and you ran all this through MQTT, right?
Yeah. This is all done through MQTT, and also like these are created from outputs to from the cloud and databases and AWS. So it is really end to end.
It's amazing. I mean, this is the meat and potatoes of our system, I suppose.
Yeah, I think the graph on the right is probably is the coolest thing that shows the entire system, right? Because it shows how the earthquake is propagating across all these sensors and everything, which is really cool.
Yeah. I'm quite excited about it too. And like one more thing, I will show you more examples. But this is like a line, this circle, this inner circle in here. That's the time that we can publish the alert. So, or that's kind of like where the earthquake is when we publish that alert. So like within this circle, like we cannot really provide any alert time, like the time for action. And then like these circles, as we go further away from the epicenter, this is 10 seconds, 20 seconds, and 30 seconds of alert. And you can see like what the intensity of shaking approximately is there. So that's kind of our, like these circles are probably the most important thing, because that tells us when we can issue the alert, because we issue an alert when there's 4 detections from 4 sensors, and then how much time people will have for action. And so if we like, as I say, I have like 15 of them, but I will not like show you like all the details.
Are any of them way off?
Some of them, well, in this, I don't have the comparison with those epicenters from the Mexican network, so I don't know exactly. But before, for example, I'll show you one that is, this is the 7.2. So unfortunately, this is from 2018, and many of these sensors in the map were off. So we reached the 4 sensors at like 30 seconds. So the region without any warning is like very wide, but of course, like we could do much better than that with higher density of networks.
Why 4? Why not 3?
Well, yeah, that's like if we really followed like how seismology, like we would need 4, because you have 4 parameters to constrain. You have earthquake latitude, longitude, depth, and origin time. So those are 4 independent variables that you need to constrain. I'm kind of fixing depth to make it easier for the algorithm. So in theory, you are right. We need only 3. But I'm not really sure whether, if we have a dense network, I would be, to make it more bulletproof, I would even go higher. I would go to 10. There's just it just depends on how many sensors we have and like how dense the network is. I think basing it off of 3 instruments, although it's theoretically possible, I think it's a little bit sketchy because you may get false alarms. Like, it's unlikely, but it may happen. But that's something to discuss, definitely. Like, we can talk about this. It can be as low as 3. You are right. But yeah, the one that I wanted to show you that's wrong is this one here, and it's not completely wrong. It's still an earthquake, and I think the magnitude is more or less right. But you can see that the algorithm was thrown off by this wrong detection that came about 10 seconds before the true arrival of the event. I don't know what kind of noise this was. Like, if that, it could have been like a tiny earthquake that came right straight before this larger earthquake, or it can be just some human-made noise. But there's this detection that got associated with these real detections at the instruments further away, and it kind of throws it off, and it still creates an event, but the event is mislocated about 50 kilometers somewhere else. So
sorry.
No, go ahead.
So this is something that we suffered with a lot on the Mexican network, which is noisy devices. Every now and again, you get a noisy device. Sometimes a noisy device, which by that I mean there's drilling next door or more traffic than usual, or the person has installed it badly, whatever it is. Sometimes a noise device, after a couple of months becomes clean again, but often you just get them. And I really think that there's a lot of importance in having on the back end something which turns off noisy devices, because it could be that this thing was triggering all day long, and it just so happened that an earthquake started and it used the nearest trigger. I think we definitely we can recognize a noisy device, and we should turn it off.
Definitely. Yeah, this is a good point. Like, you can definitely go the way that you just increase the number of like required stations for the earthquake, but like it would not prevent from this happening. So yeah, some kind of a check, like how many triggers we get at a station, and we can turn it off. Like, I think that would be good to have. Yeah, but besides this, there is I think it works quite all right. I can share these images. So definitely, like with the higher density of the network, we would be like getting more detections at early stages of the earthquake. So the region with no warning would get smaller. I think we should aim for like 10 seconds rather than 20 seconds for having all those parameters for earthquakes. So yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to share. And Ryan, like if you want to meet later in the week or sometime, like so we can somehow discuss how to attach these things to the dashboard.
Yeah, well, everything, and also the thing you were showing in the clouded database really makes it very easy to locate everything. I mean, I can already see how we would connect everything to the events. I'm thinking for the dashboard, I mean, that all those graphics that you that you just displayed there, I mean, really tell the story of what's going on when an event happens, and in time at least. I mean, I don't know how much, building that in D3 and on the front end would take probably a little bit of time, but I'd really like to figure out a way to show that all that stuff on the events page. If you right now we have, I think the plan is once we get the events on the front end, if you click on an individual event, it will show the waveform, but there's not one waveform, right? It would be a waveform for each individual sensor. So showing kind of that waterfall or whatever you want to call it of like each individual sensor and the waveform associated to it is, I think, would be really cool.
Definitely. Yeah, that's definitely, like, seeing one sensor is cool, but it doesn't really tell you the whole story. And it would be cool to display something like this. And
at some point, like, and the temporal data, like the the time that it takes as the earthquake moves through an area is really kind of the thing at the heart of everything we're doing. Because if we can get, when the alerts get issued, and how the sensors pick it all up is kind of everything. So yeah, let's meet on all that, and I'll shoot a message out to you on Slack, and maybe before the dashboard meeting on Friday if you're around then.
Yeah, Friday night mine would be the best for me. But yeah, we can.
We'll figure it out. Yeah, definitely.
Great. Another comment is that I was experimenting with different MQTT brokers. So me and John have had a whole 2 days of chatting about this. So there's nothing is set in stone, but initially it looks like there's some progress here. So the problem is that the existing Watson service is limited to 200 megabytes, which isn't good enough for our bandwidth needs. Now there is an open source version coming, but it looks like it could be the end of May. We don't know. So there's still the question marks about that. So I thought it's a good time to explore options. Now, the first thing I thought about was Mosquito MQTT, which turns out to be very limiting because it doesn't have multi-threading, and it's not very good at scaling once you add more than 1,000 devices, apparently, according to an IoT expert we just talked to. So he recommended as an open source solution a few, but he did think that the Vern MQ solution was probably the best in terms of scalability, open source, and also retaining your standard MQTT functions so that we can move over to it without having to get into a whole new system like RabbitMQ or EMQ. So that's good. So I set one up, and I got Linux Foundation to give us a DNS, which is mqtt.openew.com. And I also generated some certificates using OpenSSL. So the whole thing works quite well. So we're just going to test it for a while. And it costs us sort of $30 a month on a VM. It could be run anywhere, really. But I see that as a potential solution. John and I are now discussing whether there are implications for the provisioning process, because Watson has some uniqueness about it, which we might have to replicate or change. So anyway, that's an update.
Does that affect any of the other parts of the system, like hosting what's on the Kubernetes cluster, or?
So yes, I want to talk to Adrian when he's back from his vacation. Like if this isn't the right solution, I'm more than happy to put it away. But it's just on a VM in Washington at the moment, because I figured everything is being hosted in Washington on our data center. Mm-hmm. So I just created a little virtual machine. I've never done that in IBM. It wasn't as complicated as I thought it would be. And yeah, I just opened the ports and it's there. It could become part of the Kubernetes cluster, absolutely. I sort of it was a real pig trying to get the configuration sorted out. Nothing. I mean, doing this thing in Mosquitoes is a breeze. Doing it in Vern was horrible, but I've sort of documented it all now. So yeah. There are some issues, like it's. And I also realized some security problems in our existing system, which I was talking to John about, which is that in our existing system, you can spoof a device quite easily. Because you have a CA certificate and you have the ability to provision. There's no client certificates in our existing system. I'm sure Watson could do it, we just don't do it. So we have to make a decision about how we address that in the future. And John and I are discussing potentially, generating unique usernames and passwords that are stored in the NVM, the non-volatile memory of the device. But anyway, that's a whole other discussion. But pretty much all brokers fulfill very similar functions. It just seems to me that the scalability is what makes them different to each other.
Yeah, I think and there's two questions. I think we've always talked about two different types of deployments, right? There's what an open source person or individual citizen scientist want to do to create a whole end-to-end system themselves, and then what do we use as a reference implementation for Puerto Rico. So I think as long as we have, we'll definitely learn as we go what's going to be best. But with the long-term goal of how do you set one of these up around the world, beyond Puerto Rico, beyond the Caribbean,
right?
In addition to what works well as a hosted system, just understanding the kind of cleavage between the two at some point. But yeah, that's great. Whatever works best, I think whatever shows the value of this system and whatever gives folks more options, I think is all great.
Yeah, I'm just exploring now, but I feel like the brokers are interchangeable to some extent. And you mentioned the Zephyr project, Daniel. So I was introduced to them by Linux Foundation as well, because it's another Linux Foundation project to do with microcontroller. It's like a sort of it's like a real-time operating system, isn't it? No, it's not. It's like an abstraction of different sensor functions into an OS. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, exactly right. So we started talking to them in the context of Prometeo, right? So they have the sensors, and we've got some partners in that ecosystem that use that, and they're helping advise on some of the next generation of the hardware on that side. And they think it's really nice for the abstraction that you mentioned, but also portability when they needed to change some things. And over-the-air flashing was something that was a huge thing for them. So I thought it was something, obviously, we're running into in terms of timing for Puerto Rico and beyond. So maybe it's a smart thing to look at. I know John said he enjoyed it. So it looks like it's a growing community. And the fact that the LF ecosystem is fantastic. So just one of those interesting things. Maybe it's a future thing to look at.
Yeah, it would require porting all of our firmware over, wouldn't it? It would be work.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's the conversation we had with this partner from Prometeo too. We said, okay, if we move off of what we currently have, we know we want to refactor it. We know we want to make it more secure. We want to make it run on different types of devices. You know, what's the porting overhead, and do we need to do it now? And this person said it, may not be an issue, at least in the Prometeo context. But anyway, yeah, what's great about it is there's always something new in the open source community that's potentially something you can leverage. Sounds great.
Okay, we've run over, guys. I've got to go make lunch for the children here. But anything else? Okay. Have a great Wednesday, everybody.
Yep.
Cheers.
Bye.
Yep.
Soon.
See you around.
Have a good afternoon. Night.
Take care.